Now let's talk about properties of chords. Chord property number 1 says chords are congruent if and only if the intercepted arcs are congruent. So if we have two chords here, and if these chords intercept an arc of the circle each, then if the arcs are congruent, then the chords are congruent. And it also goes the other way around. Remember, if and only if is a biconditional statement. So if we know that the arcs are congruent, then the chords must be congruent. And if we know that the chords are congruent, then the arcs also must be congruent. It works both ways. And here's an example. Find all the minor arc measures in circle C. We are given the measure of arc Pn, that's 147 degrees, and we're also told that chord Pn is congruent to chord Pm. Then arc Pm also has to be congruent to arc Pn. That means it also measures 147 degrees. And now the last arc that we need to find out about is arc Mn, and that is the arc that completes the circle. So the three of them have to add up to 360 degrees. So we got 360 minus 147 minus 147, and that leaves us 66 degrees. So arc Mn measures 66 degrees. Chord property 2 says chords are congruent if and only if they are equidistant from the center of the circle. So they have to be the same distance away from the center. Let's imagine we have two chords in the circle. And if we have our center here, first we have to figure out the distance of these chords from the center. Remember, we're measuring the distance with the shortest segment, and that always has to be perpendicular. So the distance between the center and the chord to the left would be this line, and the distance from the center to the chord of the right would be this line, and both of these segments have to be perpendicular to the chords. And if these two are congruent, then these two have to be congruent as well. And here goes our example. If ST is equal to 60 and VU is equal to 60, then find the value of X. So here we have to dig a little bit to figure out what we're given and what that really means. If ST measures 60 and VU measures 60, then that means that ST and VU are congruent. So we can mark these two congruent. And if these two are congruent, then they are equidistant. They are the same distance away from the center W of our circle. That means that these two distances are also congruent. And now that tells us that 5x squared has to be the same as 45. 5x squared is equal to 45. Now divide by 5 on both sides, we get x squared is equal to 9. And now we're going to take the square root of both sides, which technically is positive and negative 3. And since the x squared is just a part of an expression that describes the length of this segment, then both of these numbers would work. So both answers are correct. And now let's go to our third chord property. Chord property 3 states a perpendicular bisector of a chord goes through the center of the circle. Remember, bisector means it cuts in half. Let's imagine we have the center of our circle here and a chord here. A bisector of that chord would have to go through the midpoint, and then cut the chord into two congruent pieces. And if that bisector actually also happens to be perpendicular, in other words, creating a right angle, then that bisector must go through the center of our circle. There is no other way. And here goes our last example. For the following circle, diameter BD is perpendicular to chord AC at point E. If CE is 3 units long, then what is AE? Our diameter BD goes through the center P. Diameters always have to go through the center. And that diameter is perpendicular to our chord AC. Chord AC right here. So if the diameter goes through the center, which it always does, and it's also perpendicular to the chord, then it is a bisector of that chord. That means that it cuts chord AC into two congruent pieces, AE and CE. And if we know that CE is 3 units long, then AE has to be the same length. AE is congruent to CE, therefore AE is equal to 3. Part B, if the measure of arc AC is 100 degrees, then what is the measure of arc AB and arc BC? Arc AC measures 100 degrees, and arc AC, which is created by chord AC, is bisected by our diameter the same way that the actual chord is bisected, which makes this piece congruent to this piece. And if those two pieces are congruent and they add up to 100 degrees, then each of them has to be half of 100 degrees. That's 50 degrees. So measurement of arc AB is equal to the measurement of arc BC, and that is in both cases 50 degrees. For your summary, I want you to write down and explain the 5 properties that you learned today. Good luck with that, and I will see you in class.